So hello and welcome everyone to this week's Evolutionaries Discuss Forum, where today we're talking about 2017 and the year of the Fire Rooster. And I'm really delighted to have on this week's call Richard Ashworth, who is a Feng Shui master, Davina MacKail, who is a Shamanic Seer and Hay House author, and Michael Day, who is a psychic and astrologer and coach to the stars. Let's start with you, Richard. Maybe start off by giving us your insight into what's in store for us in 2017.
Well, it's the year of the Fire Rooster, and it is also a year ruled by the number one. And in Feng Shui, these numbers have thousands of different meanings. But the central meaning of the number one, which is at the middle of the magic square, or Lo Shu, which you may or may not be familiar with, is communication. It's about talking. This is a year of communication, of negotiation, probably of compromise. And it follows on from the 2-year last year, which is the year of the woman. And what we have is we are coming into a new Chinese fake period, if you will, when female thinking comes back into its proper place. It probably has 70 or 80 years to go before that is fully realized, but that kind of approach to the world that involves communication, cooperation, those kinds of things. And other things not necessarily so positive, by the way. It's not that male thinking is inferior to female, it's just that men have taken over the world in a rather foolish way, which is why we're in the jam that we're in. But the big thing about the Fire Rooster is that change. I mean, I have lots more to say about the fine detail, but that's the most important thing.
And it's interesting because I know we were just speaking before this call began about Trump and his insanity. But in some ways, in terms of just if we just take the character of the rooster, the way he kind of, even with his, hair, he kind of is like the fabulous cockerel, isn't he? He does strut around because the cockerel is very definite in its opinions. It's very precise. It does look after the hen coop, and I noticed all the photographs of his inauguration were all surrounded by his hens, if you like, his family and his children. So he does want to look after America and keep the hen coop safe from invading foxes getting in through that. But for me, it's also a yin year. So it is, as Richard said, it's more feminine. It's not a yang fire like the monkey, it's yin. So unfortunately, Trump's a bit too much cock and not enough doodle-doo, really. So he needs to embody his inner doodle-doo, and then we might be all right. But unfortunately, possibly not.
Well, I'm just into the whole Western astrology, and this year has one main feature, that is Jupiter opposing Uranus. So Jupiter is the king, Uranus is kind of revolution, eccentricity. So maybe Trump we can see as being Jupiter, the proud sort of patriarch, monarch, sovereign. And I got dragged down to that Women's March last weekend. That was colourful and exciting because it's just a very sort of different kind of feminist protest. Lots of placards of yonis and wombs everywhere. It was all very, very different. But one thing felt familiar because Trump was taking this sort of role as a central hate figure. Lots of slogans and placards. I had a massive sense of deja vu. It took me back to the 80s when I was a young protester. And then the cry was, Maggie, 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 out, out, out. So she was the feminine hate figure. And she kind of got everyone together into one big, happily kind of liberal socialist family, because there she was, polarizing opinion. There was one person who we could really have a go at. It brought people together. Now, I saw the same thing at the weekend, that darling Mr. Trump, all his quotes, being used verbatim on the placards. He's become that glorious sort of male hate figure, and he's playing his role perfectly. He's being Jupiter, and he's fighting the forces of Uranus, that energy for rebellion and revolution. And certainly, this is the year of the feminine, just because something has to oppose Jupiter. And this year, maybe is the path of the feminine. That will be very, colourful and exciting to be around, because there's something to sort of bring people together, because poor Mr. Trump, he's born the wrong gender. So it's time for him to take the stick. That's what this year, 2017, is all about.
Yes, there was a lot of debate on Facebook about that march amongst women. Actually, in particular, I was involved in a couple of strings about that, about this being drawn into this fight, anger energy of marching and rise up, and let's fight and show how powerful we are. And it just felt to me like a whole being drawn into the same masculine energy. And this to me is the thing about Trump. It's bringing out in everyone all of this anger and hate and judgment and fight energy, it seems to me. And that's the irony of it.
Yes. Although the rooster is quite critical in its nature. So again, that judgment, criticism, that is an energy we could see this year.
Yeah.
I'm calling it the year of the turkey.
Yeah. Yeah, quite.
And Trump may be the eponymous turkey. Mm-hmm. But the rooster struts. Mm-hmm. The rooster wants attention. The rooster has a short attention span. And by the way, any individual rooster, this will not describe you, because you're much more than that. You have free will, and any description is not going to be adequate. So let's be really clear about that. But the rooster has those kinds of qualities. And what's likely is that Trump will push the boat out too far. And what we can expect is certain trouble spots. I try not to predict anything negative, because the line between creating and predicting is so close. I don't want to have a dog in the fight, if you like. But you can see that the Spratly Islands, if you use a classical formula for where the trouble spots are, the Spratly Islands are where two lines meet. We're the only place where two lines meet that I would rely on, which are the islands in the South China Sea, which have been militarized by the Chinese, and also Kashmir. So that likely some kind of trouble there. But the thing with the Chinese take is very often what Feng Shui masters will give you the consequences of not getting the lesson, as opposed to the lesson. What we Western people perhaps bring is the idea of transformation, that is learning. But we can expect the three of us as dragons. I mean, perhaps Michael's a dragon as well. I think possibly not, actually.
What are you, Michael?
I'm a rat. Can't you tell?
Yeah. Oh, that fits nicely.
I can, Michael, because the nature of the rat is to let me commit myself before you comment. That's what rats do. But this year, just to put out some sort of hardcore information, which I'm sure people watching this will want. The dragons are in pole position. Snakes are generally as well, though the snake has to kind of look over their shoulder a little, and the ox as well. So those are the ones that are basically smiled upon. The rabbit and the dog are the ones that have the biggest difficulties. And Trump, of course, is a dog, and the dog is dogmatic. And the difficulties here will be to do with being fixed to positions that don't work. And if you take Trump's Bazi, his Chinese horoscope, if you will, it is most like Elvis Presley. And I'm going to go no further with that. But it also a similarity, and again, do with this as you will, with Leonard Cohen, David Bowie, and Prince. And the weakness of all three of those men was that they were not good at dealing with people who were close to them. So the dog, who, there was a spate of dog deaths in 2016. In 2017, the dog is under greater pressure. And I would doubt that Trump has more than 2 years.
And by the way, Guy, what are you in terms of, in terms of the Chinese horse animals?
I'm not sure. I'm born in 1970.
Dog.
There we are.
Oh dear. Well, luckily we got all the dog discussion out of the way before you joined.
I don't really pay attention to those things.
Well, that's a huge statement. Okay. Well, following on from your dismissal of 4,000 years of Chinese metaphysics, I was just responding to your dog-like statement. People don't fall into boxes, Guy, absolutely, but people are subject to physical things like light, like heat and cold, like positioning. There's just no way of arguing against that, I think. But the metal dog is the one that is able to say the difficult stuff. So for what it's worth, this year, the people who are in pole position, dragons, we discussed earlier, globally, Vladimir Putin, Boris Johnson, Nigel Farage, and given that Trump is a dog, the dog and the dragon are in diametric opposition. So whether we look at the clock or whether we look at the compass, Putin and Trump are at loggerheads. The only thing is that Trump doesn't know that. So, and this dog-like, dogmatic certainty, which has this interesting interaction with the rooster, makes for a terrible certainty. Michael, I was going to say just a couple more things. Excuse me kind of monopolizing this, but I think there'll be certain expectations if people are watching this. So very basic nuts and bolts stuff. This year, ideally don't face west any more than you need to, because that's where the energy is coming in. If you like it, it's kind of facing against the prevailing wind. The Tai Chi, the big year energy, the energy of the rooster comes in from the west to the east, so don't face into the west. And also for similar reasons, don't dig, agitate, drill, those kinds of things in west, east, or south, indoors, or northeast, out of doors. And there are exceptions to that, which, you know, a skilled practitioner can tell you about. Children, don't try this at home. And the best places to be are in the east, the southeast, and probably the northeast. I say probably the northeast because people are divided into groups, and what's called west group will be best in the northeast, and what's called east group will be best in the east and southeast. So just putting that out there so that information has been offered.
And dragons are good in the southeast, I take it?
Well, the dragon, like the rooster, has what's called a self clash. So I'm glad you said that, because roosters don't necessarily have a great time in a rooster year because they have a self clash. That is, they don't get on with their own kind. So similarly, a dragon in the southeast, no, not particularly. A dragon would be better in the southwest where the monkey is, for instance, or in the north where the rat is, or in the west generally where the rooster is, not this year. But no, Feng Shui being about yin and yang, you want to find the yin to the yang. So the dragon going to the dragon position is particularly not actually a great idea.
I think it's quite good to just look at maybe some of the attributes that you'll get in a rooster year, which we've kind of mentioned just on a broader scale. Rich is brilliant at doing that sort of like individual thing. But because it is a year that's very different from that exotic wild ride of the monkey, where it's kind of all over the place and we're all trying to juggle too many plates. There is something about the rooster that is much more organized. It likes persistent, consistent effort. So that just literally pecking away at the chores or whatever it is in terms of your project, steady, persistent progress will get things done. It likes to be careful with money, looks after the money. So it's not a year for extravagant expenditure. You've got to really look after the pennies to let the pounds look after themselves kind of thing. So savings, and not that there's anywhere to save anything, but that kind of accumulation and just protecting one's resources a little bit is very wise advice in a rooster year. Things like also taking care of one's community and one's family. The rooster does look after the hens in the coop. You know, it's so this unlike last year where the monkey likes to do its own thing, the rooster is a much more collaborative animal.
Putting those things together, the unbalanced rooster has issues with trust, issues with good faith, and the classic pitfall for the rooster this year, and therefore the rabbit, because they're opposed, is to do with loyalty, faith, that kind of stuff. And this is a year both of good faith but broken faith. This is not a year to be entering into contracts unless you're absolutely sure what you're doing. And also, although it is not such a raucous roller coaster as a monkey year, I mean, the monkey is mischievous and accident prone, there is still that metal thing. And the rooster is liable to be accident prone. So the monkey is liable to be accident prone in the rooster year. So for instance, Theresa May has probably several disasters ahead of her. I mean, I don't mean physical ones, I mean serious faux pas. So I hear what you say about the rooster, but in the rooster year, it's very much a knife edge. And one orthodox way of looking at what's going to happen in a particular year is to look back at previous ones, because rooster years are somewhat alike. So 2005 is somewhat like 2017, all sorts of silliness in the Middle East and 100 different comparisons. The last fire year, 1957, as you pick up on, but previous fire years, and these are interesting ones, 1837 is the last one that's both also a fire year and has the same Gua number, that is the same square, the same Lo Shu magic square, which is the year that Queen Victoria came to the throne. So again, I'm going to go no further with that. You know, those seers will probably get something from that if you haven't got there already. But what's also interesting is that 1297, which is another date that most people will just pull out their back pocket like that, which was, what happened in 1297?
No.
It's the middle of reel 2 of Braveheart. It's the Battle of Stirling Bridge. And what we've got, as we did in 2014, which reflects 1714, the accession of George I, therefore no more Stuart Kings, and 2015, i.e. the same as 1715, exactly the same pillar, when we had the first Highland uprising. So similarly, we have a disproportionate power to the Scottish this year. And politically, that looks like where things will go in this country, because the only chance of there being anything other than a Tory hegemony for the next generation is cooperation between progressive parties. And the elephant in the room is the Scot Nats.
Well, it'd be interesting. What do you think in terms of, as I say, that the EEC being formed in 1957, and because there's still controversy over this whole Brexit of whether it'll actually go through or not, and there are great forces to try and upset it. So it's fascinating. What do you reckon, Richard, in terms of what would you predict of whether there would be Brexit will actually take place, where the rooster is much more about collaboration?
There's going to be a swing in the opposite direction. I doubt that Article 50 will effectively be actioned within the next 18 months. I doubt that will happen. I think there is too much opposition. But another way of looking at the year, a classical way of looking at the year, is the hexagrams. So there is a hexagram, as I'm sure you know, for every year, every month, every day, and every hour. And the way that a classical Feng Shui diviner would do it is to work out the hexagram for the moment that the year changed. The way I do it is a little bit unorthodox, because I do it from Dungji, that is the winter solstice. The hexagrams look like we start with hexagram 31, which is about short-termism. It's about immediate stuff. It's the 31 is wind. Lake over mountain, but it's short-term, immediate, short-sighted kind of stuff, which leads, and that classically that hexagram would rule the first quarter of the year. The second quarter of the year, number 42, is called increase, which means that there is some kind of a visible positive outcome. And for Trump to say, to recognize that people in the Rust Belt, for instance, have been ignored, he's dead right. But, a generation of liberal administrations have really not given the fresh crack of the whip. And you can understand how they might elect a total reprobate who at least says something different. You can kind of follow that. But so there'll be some kind of a sign of that. But mostly, I think it'll be show business. We get to hexagram 17, which is following, sway following, which means following both in terms of following the argument and following in terms of being behind somebody. And it suggests a kind of sheep-like behavior that might be enforced. It is not a great hexagram for that time of the year, the third quarter of the year. And the fourth quarter is P number 12, which is splitting, where you have heaven on top of earth, and heaven is going up and earth is going down. So it is a suggestion of a real parting of the ways between organizations, groups, clubs, political parties, administrations. And I would suggest, for instance, just to push the boat out, there will be secessions from the Union before 2030.
Yeah.
And this year, the end of this year, certain states, California, New York, Oregon, Washington, the most likely, the Northwest Seaboard is what's in focus, are liable to be considering that very seriously by the end of the year. It's just a mooted thing, but right now, but by the end of the year, serious consideration of that. Though its action is probably several years away.
You mean the United States kind of dissolving?
I do.
Wow.
I do.
That's a pretty big prediction.
Not going to happen.
Michael?
How to get famous, make outrageous predictions. I love that.
But you know, Michael,
He's already famous. He doesn't need more fame.
the thing I've discovered, Michael, is that when you get it wrong, everyone forgets. And when you get it right, they remember. So
Yes.
it's worth pushing.
Win-win.
Also, exactly. But also, I mean, to be serious, there is no point making predictions unless you take a risk and get specific. You know, I've attended so many Chinese feng shui masters presentations where they say people won't like the government and markets will go up and down. I mean, what did you learn? So forgive me, but I make a point of being as specific as I can, and sometimes I'm wrong.
And going back to what you said at the beginning, Richard, or earlier on, as master manifestors, are you predicting the future or creating it?
Exactly. Yes. No, maybe.
I often think this, Davina, about you, because Davina, if you speak something, you're a seer, but if you speak something, it's almost like you speak it into manifestation. I often think that Davina's spoken, so it's going to happen.
But it's just when sometimes when I'm talking to someone, particularly with the Bazi, where I will pick something very specific and, you know, sometimes very uncomfortable because there is no point doing it otherwise. And I notice that it comes into being with the power of the words as I say them.
Yes.
So I have learned to be very careful.
Yeah, me too.
Well, the elephant in the room here is the Chinese element of all this, because we have a sense that Trump, being that Western agent, is specifically targeting what's happening in the South China Sea. So I would predict going to be lots of really juicy conflicts going on around the Chinese frontier. And we'll have Mr. Trump shaking hands with the Dalai Lama. That'll be very interesting because it's all about making trouble. And I'm sure that Mr. Trump will be a great stirrer in that Jupiter versus Uranus 2017. Lots of provocative episodes. Though I do see, in fact, that Mr. Trump, being a dog, he'll keep hanging on to his bone for as long as possible. I think he'll be around till 2020. And there's a really terrifying apocalyptic conjunction in 2020 that is much more sort of important to me. So
what is that, Michael? What is that conjunction?
It's the ultimate nightmare. We got Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto conjunction. That's what I might call the Dark Messiah conjunction. So that is when the shit will really hit the fan, astrologically speaking. So I think Trump will sort of hang on, create some juicy conflicts, then he'll sort of really be bitten quite heavily in 2020. I mean, there's no second term because we're looking at global warfare in that year. But for now, things will just get more and more steamy and controversial as they do. But Trump being the dog, he will hang on till then.
I read those metaphors much more carefully myself. But 2020, astrologically, would be a dog traditionally loses in a rat year. So that would kind of fit in with what you're saying. As far as the apocalyptic stuff is concerned, I'm on the side of the angels, and I will continue to look to the light.
Well, it's interesting, just from an archetype point of view, then we've got 2020 is 4 the Emperor and 20 Judgment. So it's quite interesting from that point of view. So it is, and it's like, that's really the cause of any conflict, isn't it? I'm right, you're wrong, or you're right, I'm right, wrong. Do you know what I mean?
Metal types of conflict, rooster monkey conflicts tend to be about that. The more wooden conflicts, tiger rabbit conflicts about I want more space. So 1940 and 1939 are about space. But you're right, the current ones are ideological, whether we're talking about Muslim, Christian, or Muslim, whatever the hell it is, or, you know, West and East and all that kind of stuff. They are exactly as you say, you know, I'm right, you're wrong, I have to kill you. But what I would say, just lightening up a little bit, is we're in for some serious flooding on the East Coast.
As in East Coast of America, or England, or all East Coasts?
England particularly. England I'm very clear about. England.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was 90, again, going back to the last Fire Rooster, 1957, there was a massive hurricane on the East Coast of America that was, at the time, the worst in recorded history, and it came very, very early in the season too, for hurricanes.
I didn't know that. That's very interesting. We also had independence of Singapore, if I remember rightly. The independence of Singapore. So I think we have Singapore being very important, because Singapore is kind of how China sees itself in 20, 30 years' time. And it's also how Theresa May sees England, sees Britain. So some very important stuff in Singapore. And Singapore is also on the same line as the Spratly Islands, which is what Michael Day was talking about. You know, the South China Sea that Michael referred to, the Spratly Islands. So for better or for worse, real international focus in those places.
Well, it's interesting. I've just been watching, I've got a 9-year-old son, and we've been watching this thing called Legends of Tomorrow, which is an incredible decent thing. And they were talking all the time about timelines and what's possible to bend and shape and shift and all these things. And there's a whole dialogue going on about what is free will and things predetermined. And basically, they've gone to this in place in the film, which is called the timeless space, or the void, which is quite interesting. It's that space beyond time, and this is the only place you can manipulate free will from. So once you're in the play of time, then time is going to roll itself out the way it will, yeah? And so the way I heard this internally was that when you go into those deep states of meditation, you go into that super consciousness, which is actually in the timeless realm, and that's where you can really shapeshift possibilities.
Yes.
If you're established in the collective consciousness and your personal consciousness, you're going to be in the bandwidth of the ordinary, and so you're going to pretty much reproduce what was in the past forwards into the present and on into the future. Teal Swan, I don't know if you know her, she talks tremendously about, you know, how the future operates, and her reference is that most psychics can predict the future because most people live in these probability realms where they're just projecting the past forwards, but when you're dealing with creative people, it's very, very hard to navigate what the future will be, because they really are coming from spontaneous creation and they're not navigating from past reference points. So it's like, you know, I'm fascinated hearing what you're saying and listening to it in terms of patterns and probabilities. And I can also see there have been certain moments in my life where I really broke through onto different timelines where I do something radically different, which is not related to what was past or yesterday or the week before. And I deliberately keep myself fresh like that, you know, so I don't get stuck into these sort of predictable ruts for myself. And, you know, because I love that spontaneous creativity that comes through. And that's how I experience grace as well. You know, I mean, the phenomenon of grace is something which is transcending, you know, prediction or future possibility. It comes on this vertical axis. And that's where the realm of miracles is constantly occurring as well, and we can open up those levels.
That kind of goes back to what I was saying about the marching thing, about this kind of using the same energy of Trump to fight Trump, and instead to actually transcend that, as you say, Guy, into that higher space where we can, through our intention, create the world we do want, as opposed to fight against all the bits of what's unfolding that we don't. Because it seems to me Trump is very much operating from duality, you know, the judgment, duality, black, white, they are evil, we're going to wipe them off the face of the earth sort of speeches.
But the beauty about him being in play is that he represents the trickster god, you know, he represents the contrast. And, you know, if you had another ordinary president, you know, another Obama or something like this, who's going to reproduce the mold,
That's right.
there'd be no conflict. There'd be no, you know, I mean, war and chaos generates, you know, tremendous consciousness. And he's got everyone on their toes. I mean, this march of the women was just phenomenal. It's like, you know, he's a gift in disguise without realizing it. He's called forth the sacred feminine, you know, completely without any conscious intent. But it's like this stand against him it's got nothing to do with him. It's like he's a trigger pin for this enormous awakening of what needs to be rebalanced in the whole culture, not just in American culture. So it's like, you know, I mean, I think the guy's an arse and all those things at a personal level, but it's like we're not dealing with him at a personal level. We're dealing with the archetype of what he's representing in the space.
And it may be that we need to see that extreme in order to decide where we stand.
Yeah. I mean, people say that he's a symptom of the collective consciousness of America, you know? It's like, you know, he hasn't come from nowhere. He's come from a context. So he's this puppeteer, which is representing how a majority view is viewing, you know, women, work, economics, you know, and this territorialism, this patriarchy that is manifesting, even with the whole Brexit thing. Let's become a separate country, a separate America. You know, it's like, for me, this is causing what in me a bigger response for planetarianism, if you like. You know, just it has a whip side of me. It's like, it's so important that we pull together when you have these diversities where people are trying to sort of, you know, tighten their own ship, you know, forgetting that we're a human race here. So.
This was the vision that when I went to Peru with you, Davina, and it was the night of the election. We'd heard that morning he'd been elected, and that night we had the shaman who came from the jungle, and we did the medicine journey, the ayahuasca journey. Oh my goodness, very powerful. And I had a very strong vision of Trump in his extreme yang masculine, opening a polarity, opening a portal of the duality of that. It had opened a portal for the evolved feminine to come through. And it was a very powerful vision that was his gift to the world.
It's like the yin and yang, isn't it? When the pendulum swings too far one way, it automatically has to come the other way. That's what holds the seed of the feminine in that extreme masculine, that extreme yang.
And like Osama bin Laden, Trump comes from some kind of Hollywood / Marvel comics reality, which is very much an American thing. And I was interested, Michael, in you clearly are familiar with that territory of that place that is somewhere between visualization and prayer, which is, you know, somewhere beyond algorithms, if you will, where we come across things the way they are. And the paradox is that it's not about changing them, it's about getting in line with them. And what perhaps needs to happen is for more of us to be more aware of that, because it goes beyond rightness and wrongness. It goes even beyond healing. It is a question of, in my experience of this, of seeing the way it wants to go and getting out of the bloody way. There is a book, actually, a book of medieval mysticism called The Cloud of Unknowing.
Yeah, I know it.
Which, you know it. Well, I thought you might. I mean, it's kind of the instruction manual, isn't it?
It's incredible, yeah. So good.
Yeah,
so deep with it.
Yeah, I thought you did. You're kind of talking that language. Clearly, you know the territory. But I was going to say one other thing. The illustration of those strange kind of fantastic figures, Bin Laden, Trump. I mean, just that could only come from America. They're American Hollywood rock and roll kind of consciousness. There's a book called Cavalier and Clay by Michael Chabon, which is about how Superman comes out of the idea of the Golem, which was a Jewish kind of superhero monster kind of a thing, and the need for the Jews to be saved in the 1940s. And we have Trump and Bin Laden, the final kind of, possibly final, physical manifestation of those, of particular kinds of ways of thinking. So.
Yeah, I mean, I also think he's got lots of kind of possibilities that are unyet explored, because we're focusing on all of his sort of dark traits, you know, all these things which are going on. But I think he's a businessman. He's going to get to work, and he's made a promise to kind of clean up Washington. And I think that's going to be quite interesting to actually see how he streams through corruption and all the sort of black ops and the mismanagement which is in the background.
Yeah.
And I think he's going to really step up for that, because he doesn't belong to the elite. You know, he's in a different class by his own financial wealth and things. So I think there's going to be some interesting things which are popping up around that.
And for me, with the protests that were happening, my question is, where were all those people? And at the risk of being controversial, where were all those women when Bernie Sanders needed them?
Yeah.
Oh, don't mention the war. Yes. Well, it's called the power of hindsight, and the horse has bolted and so on. But it's time now to bring everyone together. I think really, Jupiter versus Uranus points out the power of the net, of technology. Uranus is about technology and about this whole new world of social media. So I think what will bring Trump down will be social media, internet, technology, because everybody is watching everybody else these days. So there's a constant commentary on what Trump and other leaders are doing. And I think Theresa May is very kind of strong. She can tough it out, but I think Trump will feel quite offended by all these attacks on social media and him being lampooned constantly. So this year is about technology. The robots are coming. That's a bigger issue, I feel, than all this Brexit nonsense. I mean, Brexit will take years to sort out. It's a huge spanner in the works. And it's about this trickster energy is very strong, not just in the USA, but also in the UK. And it's going to be one big farrago of chaos and nonsense for 5 years. Indeed. A good
But there's another even the darker side of the technology, isn't there? Because whilst they're on the one side, it's like power to the people, gives people power in a way that they've not had, and gives people an individual, a common voice in a way. But then there is also the phenomenal machine behind that is creating AI at an exponential rate. And so the data on each of us and the collective data and how we are being manipulated, and most people, if you're consciously aware, don't even understand the manipulation of all those social media channels. So it's not quite as free speech as we might be led to believe sometimes.
My wish would be, I mean, it's like that his statement, power to the people, is going to shoot himself in the foot. I mean, there's a great children's movie called Ants, where the ants finally realize that they can overthrow the locusts.
Yes.
And it's just like, it's only a matter of time before people step fully into their power, where they realize that self-leadership is the way. What it does to me personally, it just makes me even stronger into my own self-leadership, and where am I coming from, and where am I creator, and my work on the dance floor is to activate everyone as their own individual creator and get them in touch with their resources and feelings and senses. And yes, the internet is a beautiful thing at one level, but it's like we forget the internet, which is our telepathic connection and our connection to existence and the universe and everything else. And I think we need to keep remembering these human skills. I mean, I'm slightly concerned about the AI thing. It's being sold to us as a great revolutionary future, but it's complete manipulation of our freedom to express from our own creative self. So
and actually robs us of a lot of just general survival skills, and it still disconnects us from the earth.
Yeah.
And from nature, which is so much what we are ultimately. There's too much of that technology in a sense. I mean, it's a useful tool. We all use it. It's fantastic. We wouldn't be able to do this without it.
Yeah.
And it is amazing. But, while I'm also watching this, I can see a herd of deer sitting in my garden. And I'm kind of the other half of me wants to go out and play with them.
Yeah.
Talk to the tree and remember what's real.
Well, I'm a rat, so I'm always seeking opportunities for wealth and fame. So this year is a great time to invest in Trump and May coffee mugs. Business.
Because
Reagan and Maggie all over again. It's all, it's a new cycle, and I just do what the goddess tells me. Great.
And it's a warm-up for you for 2020, for your next rat year, the apocalypse. You're going to make millions.
I'll make a fortune in 2020. Beware the Ides of March.
Yeah, okay. I have to know how to follow that. I mean, for me, self-leadership is important. But in my personal life, I feel we need to really skill each other to give lots of resources. A lot of people are awake to the, what we need to do. But it's like we need the tools to take the next step and the next step and the next step. And I really feel tribal awareness is the way. is that, you know, I see the magnificence of people doing work in different places around the world. I want them all to sit together in a forum like this. I want there to be, you know, positive sharing groups with evolutionaries all over the planet, and actually start to create new networks which have got nothing to do with politics and government, but it's got to do with the internalized government of the people. You know, so, you know, power to the people in a very profound way, that we activate our resources, but we also provide frameworks where these communications can happen and activity can come from there.
And it is about the transcendence of, I think we've got into our densest physical form. We are at our most material, if you like. And in that polarity, it's the real chance to start actually lightening the layers. So I tend to be a cup half full person. So, you know, yes, there could be a lot of pessimistic views, but I tend to look at the optimistic solution to that. And I'm going to keep focused on the solution of that we can raise the vibration, we can raise consciousness, we can transcend these difficult matrix structures that we're embedded in.
Yes, and we seem to, at this point in evolution, have got to a point where we can only be at our best in opposition to something. And it may be that the forces of darkness currently manifesting are to help us grow to a point where we can be at our best, most benevolent, most creative, most heavenly, without an enemy.
Okay, I'm going to end it there. So thank you all so much for coming on. It's been a really fascinating discussion and hilarious at points. So thank you for brightening my day, because I started out today with feeling a lot of dread and doom. So thank you to Richard Ashworth, Feng Shui Master, to Davina, MacKail, Shamanic Seer and Hay House author. Thank you to Michael Day, psychic, astrologer and coach to the stars. And thank you to Guy Barrington, who is an ecstatic rave entrepreneur, I guess I would call you. So thank you all for joining us, and have a great day.
Thanks, Rachel. You too.
Bye for
Bye.
now. Bye-bye.